What's up, guys? Today Phil and we showed you in a previous video how to remove at least the majority of these painted pinstripes on this beautiful 98 Lexus SC400. It removed probably 75 to 80%, but as you can see there's still some left over. So we're going to show you firsthand. I'm going to try a couple things. We tried taking a plastic razor blade and kind of scraping at it, but it didn't want to come off. So this is a pretty advanced trick here. I'm going to use a single edge razor blade. And I'm going to show you guys how I'm going to kind of use this here. This is a real advanced trick. The paint is already kind of burned here from the previous time it was wet sanded. So basically what you do is take your razor blade here and you want to stand it up straight. And this is going to be super advanced, so you want to choke up on it. And this is a good technique for sanding. Say if you have a run on the, say for example you painted this fender and you ran it, you could run over it with this razor blade. But and just use extreme caution if you're going to do this. But you stand it up straight. It is a fresh razor blade, and you can kind of scratch at it. This is kind of one trick I've used in auto body. And we're going to just see how this works, because sometimes some of this stuff is, working in real time. And you got to figure out what works. So basically I'm going to scratch at it, and I'm keeping the razor blade kind of vertical. And you can see it's starting to remove it. So, you want to choke up on the razor blade so there's just a little bit exposed. That way you have a lot of control. And the biggest key to this is you don't want to dig into the paint this way, and you don't want to dig into the paint this way. So keep it straight and kind of scratch at it. And this is, a lot of times I can choke up on it a little more and go back and forth, but this way is working pretty well. So a lot of, whether it's painting, detailing, you got to find out what works. And this is kind of a great trick for removing runs, or if there's, say stuff on the panel that stuck to it and you don't want to use anything else, because the biggest thing is if I wet sand this, I want to be careful that I'm not sanding on either side of the stripe, because a lot of times what happens is you'll burn either side of the stripe because it's a high spot, and so you'll end up sanding through on either side. So this is actually working quite well. And if you guys are having, if you're working on cars and you have challenges, you need to try different things to see what works best. The beauty of doing it this way is I can take a little bit of sandpaper, like some 25 or even 2000 grit, and go over it, which I'll kind of do that here. So this is actually working real well. And this is, like I said, this is part of it. I don't know everything. I have a bunch of tricks in my repertoire, 30 years worth, and it's pretty amazing looking back. And this is actually working quite well. So I'm going to continue rolling with this because it's working well. And that's what I was saying. You got to kind of, there's all sorts of different ways to, attack things. And this right now is working extremely well. So the Easy Off oven cleaner got the majority of it. Like I said, this is advanced, so just take your time and don't, make sure you keep that razor blade vertical, because if you tilt it one direction or the other, it'll scrape it up pretty good, and you'll end up going through the paint and you'll have to repaint it. So this is a great trick if you're a painter watching this. This is how I used to scratch most of my runs out when I would get them. Earlier in my career I got them a lot more, so later in the career I learned how to spray so I didn't get them. But so you just keep kind of doing this. I could leave a little bit of this, for some sandpaper, because I'm going to sand it anyways, because you'll see it'll leave a little bit of a kind of a mark there. And so I'm going to I'll keep doing this, moving forward, but I'm going to show you guys how I'm going to attack it next. I'll hit this spot right here. And this is working quite well. The Easy Off oven cleaner worked amazing. It's my buddy Phil here. He's been helping me, just kind of, he's wanting to learn detailing and, get into it a lot more. And he was pretty amazed at how well it worked. So we got, that's good enough for me. There's a little spot there I'm going to get. So I would say I got 98% of it. I'll put my razor blade back. I'm going to switch to 2000 grit. This is wet or dry paper. These are this is basically, this brand is Norton Black Ice, and I'm going to take a bucket of Dawn dish soap, and I do have a grit guard in the bottom. These are beautiful. So just a shot of Dawn dish soap. I put quite a bit in there on this round because I wanted it to be super slick. So you could use a block or you could use it by hand. I do have Meguiar's E72 sanding blocks, but I sand it one of two different ways. So I'll use a microfiber as well from Costco, but I sand it one of two different ways. I either take the sandpaper, and of course I could use a block, and I'll cross hatch it, which means I hold the paper flat and I cross hatch it this way, and then I'll cross hatch it the other way, or I'll cock it sideways and leave the front edge kind of, all my edges kind of tilted up, and I'll sand back and forth. Kind of want to keep your hand flat, so you know you can go in circles as well, but this is a great way to handle this situation. So that's about it for the 2000 grit. This is 2000. It pretty much, you know, eliminated the excess. So I'm going to jump from here to 2500 and fold it in four. I do want to show you guys one trick. When I fold my paper, these are half sheets. They do make full sheets, but I fold them in thirds. And then one thing I do when they're brand new is I soak them in the bucket for 10 or 15 minutes to soften them. But also when I first start sanding, I'll soak them in the bucket, I'll bring them out, and I'll break my corners down. These edges here will create what they call train tracks. And especially when a lot of guys first start sanding, they sand like this, and these edges are real hard. So this paper's been sitting in water, and it's actually a used piece. So the edges are broken down, but I'll break my edges down, especially the corners, and I'll kind of roll the paper back and forth like this, and I'll break the edges down. So one thing I used to do when I'd prime cars is I'd sand my hard lines on my fenders first and soften the paper. Anyway, moving forward, this is 2500. So I'm going to go back over the 2000 with 25, and then and we're just kind of basically refining the scratch. So I'm going to use plenty of lubrication from the Dawn dish soap. That'll help it slide on the surface. It's important when you're wet sanding to listen. If it starts sounding like there's something underneath it, stop sanding. So that's pretty much done. And then, so if you did hear something real quick, if you did hear something underneath it and it, you know, sounded like there was something scratching the surface like a piece of sand, redunk in your bucket and then wipe the surface back off. I'm going to jump to another product which is really awesome. I am going to use this by hand just to show you guys, because if for some reason you didn't have a sander, but this is 3M Trizact paper. You want to kind of come in, Phil? This is 3000 grit, 5000. They make, I know Merca makes a 2000, 3M makes a 3000, a 5000, and an 8000. But you can use this on an orbital sander, or you could use it on a Rupes, which is basically the same thing. It's a DA, dual action. And you can kind of come over it, or you could do it by hand. So for some reason, I'm just showing you, you know, I have a sander, but if you didn't have a sander, you could go over it with 3000, you know, by hand, and then switch to your 5. And I'll keep the paper on it, you know, with the sandpaper side up. It's almost like a felt paper. I'm gonna grab a dry towel and I'm gonna dry it, and I'll flip it over. Use the old-fashioned blower, and that's it. You'll see kind of a fine haze, and then I'll polish that with a Rupes. I could use a rotary buffer, but these days the Rupeses work pretty amazing. So I'm going to follow the same process throughout the whole car. You know, the one thing is just try things. You know, try razor blades, try easy off oven cleaner, you know, try wet sanding, try plastic razor blades. There's not always one way to do it, but this is one way that we found works well. So hopefully that helped you guys out. And if you have any questions, leave them in the comment below. And thanks for watching.